In Parshat Emor, in Perek Kaf Bet, Pasuk Lamed Bet, we read a very, very famous pasuk. V'lo tachalu et shem kodshi. We are commanded not to desecrate God's holy name. V'niktashti b'toch b'nei Yisrael. God's name must be sanctified in the midst of the Jewish people. Ani Hashem mekadeshchem. I am your God, the pasuk concludes, who will sanctify you. This pasuk serves as the halachic basis for the incredibly important and central obligation of Kiddush Hashem, of sanctifying God's name, and the opposite, the very serious prohibition of not desecrating God's name, Chilul Hashem. And even though we often speak in more general terms about behaving nicely in public and other such circumstances as a Kiddush Hashem, or if we, identifiably Jewish or religious people, act in an inappropriate way, being Machal Hashem, and that's all true based on the Gemara. However, we know that the most extreme example of these mitzvot are when we have a Gentile persecutor, a non-Jew, who is trying to coerce us into violating certain mitzvot. And despite the fact that generally we say v'chai behem, a person can transgress rather than give up their life, the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem teaches us that when it comes to the big three, the cardinal three of Erot, of idolatry, avodah zarah, gili arayos, sexual immorality, and retzicha, and murder, a Jew is required to give up his or her life rather than transgress. What is striking is that the Rambam, when he presents this halachos in his Sefer HaMitzvot, Mitzvot Asay Tet, when he talks about the example, the classic example of not bowing down to an idol and rather giving up your life, the Rambam says as follows, that let's say a person unfortunately isn't strong enough to withstand the challenge, and coerced and intimidated and threatened by this Gentile persecutor, unfortunately the person chooses to violate and bow down to avodah zarah instead of giving up his or her life. If you think about it, says the Rambam, the person didn't actually violate avodah zarah. After all, the person doesn't really believe in the idol. The person is just bowing down to save their life. Bowing down is, just a form of physical exercise or calisthenics. There's nothing inherent about that act. It's only prohibited if you bow down or do any other activity because you're doing that as a form of worship because you believe in the idol. But in this case, the person's only doing it to save his or her life. And yet, says the Rambam, it is still prohibited. V'lo nita'ehu lachshov shekafarnu, v'af al pi shebelibeinu, ma'amin bo yit'aleh. We are still nevertheless commanded to give up our lives and not create the mistaken impression, nita'ehu. Don't give the mistaken impression that we've desecrated or denied God, even though in our heart of hearts, we of course still believe in Him. But of course, if that's the case, if the Rambam is telling this explicitly, then that begs the question. If this is not even a technical violation or transgression of avodah zarah, so what's so bad about it? Why would we have to give up our life? It seems somewhat tautological, but in fact it would seem to be a very difficult question. If according to the Rambam it's not avodah zarah, so what's so bad about it? Why do we have to give up our life? So Rav Soloveitchik is reported to have answered the question based on the continuation of the Rambam's words, where the Rambam recounts in that same passage the heroism, the famous heroism of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, where they allowed themselves to be thrown into a fiery furnace rather than to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's idol. When the Rambam describes this, he first mentions that others of that same generation did in fact bow down to the idol, and that by doing so, v'haisa bazeh cherpa gedola al Yisrael. It was a tremendous humiliation and a tremendous embarrassment for the Jewish people that they did so. Those are the words of the Rambam. And Rav Soloveitchik explains that what's going on here, what you see from the Rambam, is the greatness of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah lie in the fact that their actions undid that cherpa. It restored the honor in place of the previous embarrassment and dishonor. Their behavior, their Mesirat Nefesh, restored the honor to the Jewish people. In essence, says Rav Soloveitchik, what we see from this is that the root of Kiddush Hashem is when our actions bring great pride or honor to the Jewish people, and then by extension, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem has identified His lot in this world with us. And when we do things that bring great pride to the Jewish people, that necessarily brings great honor and pride to God. And if we do things technically transgressive or not, but we do things that bring a cherpa gedola, in the words of the Rambam, that bring great dishonor and embarrassment and shame to the Jewish people, the root of Chil Hashem is that shame and embarrassment is then extended to Hashem, to the Ribono Shel Olam. And therefore, says Rav Soloveitchik, that's why we must die rather than bow down to the idol. Even if we don't really believe in the idol, even if that wouldn't be technically in any other context a transgression of Avodah Zarah. But in this context, with the Gentiles threatening your life if you don't bow down and you choose to bow down, that itself is a cherpa gedola. That is an embarrassment, that is a shame. You've chosen your life over the way he perceives. It may not be true in your heart, but to the Gentile forcing you and coercing you, it seems as if you've chosen idolatry over your life. And therefore, if that's the case, that is a cherpa gedola. And bringing pride and not dishonor the Jewish people, that is the essence of Kiddush Hashem. I would just add in conclusion that we find ourselves in the period of the year that I like to refer to sometimes as the Yoms. First with Yom HaShoah, then Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaAtzmaut, and then Yom Yerushalayim. And perhaps if one thinks about it, part of the essence of what we're celebrating, what has been such a dramatic 20th and now the 21st century in recent Jewish history, is what unfortunately, the cherpa gadol, the tremendous shame, the tremendous tragedy that was visited on the Jewish people when we couldn't defend ourselves, when we were slaughtered during the Holocaust, or even some of the tremendous pain that we have, even that we commemorate on Yom HaZikaron. But so much of our celebration of Yom HaAtzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim is celebration of these great miracles that Hashem has given us and the great pride that has been restored in the Jewish people through Medinat Yisrael. It is no coincidence that the very same Rav Soloveitchik, in his most famous essay about Medinat Yisrael and about religious Zionism, Kol Dovid Ofek, describes 6 knocks, 6 benefits, 6 messages, so to speak, that Hashem has sent us through Hakamat HaMedina, through the establishment of the State of Israel. And if you look at all 6 of them, the common thread through all of them is the Kiddush Hashem that Soloveitchik believed was embodied by the creation of the State of Israel. At the heart of all of these knocks is one theme, Kiddush Hashem. Whether it's the dramatic rebuke to classic Christian theology that thought God had abandoned us, the renewed sense of pride that previously assimilated Jews have now that they are being Jewish, or as Rav Soloveitchik says, perhaps the most important dofek, the most important knock of all, the new reality, as he said, that Jewish blood is no longer hefker. The common denominator of all the knocks of Rav Soloveitchik is that Medinat Yisrael brings great pride to the Jewish people and therefore by extension to Hashem. And that is the Kiddush Hashem that the Rambam teaches us, as Rav Soloveitchik understood it, here in Parshat Emor. The essence of Kiddush Hashem is to do things that bring pride to us and the Jewish people, and therefore by extension to the Ribono Shel Olam himself.